All right, guys. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about a really good question that came up, submitted by a follower, Becky. Thank you for your question. It's a really good question. The question is, and I'm going to rephrase it too as I understand it. So the question is, what's more impressive? And this is, in her own words, what's more impressive, the extreme obedience of a Malinois or the 8 out of 10 times follow commands hound or the livestock guardian dog? And so, as I understand the question, there's obviously a lot of differences between certain dogs. And the breed that's become very popular among dog trainers, probably in the past 10 years, has been the Malinois. The Malinois has become a very popular breed everywhere, not just with dog trainers, but unfortunately with a lot of pet owners too. And I say unfortunately because a lot of pet owners don't understand the breed, and so they end up getting the dog in trouble. And this is why now we have more Malinois rescues than we've had, in the past, because of improper placement. So anyway, going back to the question, so the dog that is very popular now with dog trainers is the Malinois. A lot of people compete in sports, and Malinois are great for competition. They tend to be great for competition because they have these great traits. They have the endurance, they have the agility to do various types of sports, and they have the motivation to just go on and on and on, which is why Malinois dominate a lot of sports. And it's why, kind of a side topic, sometimes people think using a Malinois for certain sports is considered cheating. So that's a completely different topic. But let's talk about a little bit about that for sure. But let's talk about the difference between that and some other dogs that are very difficult. And I've heard people say things like, oh, sure, anybody can train a Malinois, but, I'll be impressed if I see like a bloodhound doing a lot of obedience. And we're going to talk about that in this episode. Just make sure that you like and subscribe if you like this episode. If you like the previous episodes, just please give me a support. Subscribe to the channel or subscribe to the podcast. And now let's go back into it. So the herding breeds, and in this case the Malinois, but I'm going to use working dogs in general, okay? The working dogs that are, herding breeds. This could be the Malinois, the German Shepherd, right? The Dutch Shepherd. There are differences in temperament with each breed, even within a certain category. But in general, the herding breeds tend to be the ones that are used for a lot of purposes like sports, and they do tend to make some really nice demo dogs because of the excitement that they tend to bring into the obedience. So what's the difference between them and some of the other dogs like the scent hounds, even some of the sight hounds, but primarily the scent hounds, the dogs that just love to use their nose, like they were bred for it, right? Like the bloodhound, basset hounds. So the scent hounds, and even some of the guardians of the flock dogs like the Pyrenees and even some of the mastiffs. So what's the difference between those? Well, the difference when it comes to workability is this: the working dogs, the herding breeds. Let's make a little bit more specific. The herding breeds. I don't want to make it too specific like the Malinois, okay? But think of your breed that you think, oh, this breed is really, typically really energetic and very willing to work. It's not always herding breeds, by the way. Some of the other working dogs, like the retrievers and the pointers, they make amazing dogs for various types of sports as well. Maybe not protection, but the retrievers are really, really nice dogs too. They have a lot of that agility, the endurance, and they have a lot of the motivation. So think of whatever breed you think of that you think to yourself, this is a really nice breed to work with. It's a really nice breed. Or if you think, well, if they're using this breed, they're cheating, right? Whatever your outlook on the situation is. But the difference between those dogs and the other types of dogs like the scent hounds, the mastiffs, the guardians of the flock, or even your pet dogs that really don't want to do much, right? The difference between them is the one group of dogs, the working dogs, whether it's the lab or the Malinois or whatever, they tend to be more resilient. They tend to be more they tend to have more of a willingness to push past discouragement. They really do. They tend to enjoy a little bit of that conflict that comes with the activity, whether that activity is sports or even training can be an activity. Some people, I know this from experience because I know some of these people, they might not be the most savvy trainers. I'm not saying this in a condescending way at all, okay? But some people are not the most savvy trainers, but they have a lot of willingness to get it done. So if I give that person a regular pet dog like a doodle, right, or any sort of pet dog that was not bred to work, or even a bloodhound. They were bred to work, but not the type of work that a lot of us associate with obedience training or sport work, right? These scent hounds are bred for a very specific purpose, and looking pretty in an obedience field is not one of those purposes. So if I give that person one of those dogs, their willingness to get it done, combined with their inexperience or maybe a little bit of a lack of skill, if I pair them up with one of those dogs don't have as much of a resilience or willingness to stay in the activity of working the obedience. Because a lot of times working obedience is an activity. It is not sometimes, it's not always, hey, follow the food, follow the toy. A lot of times it's a lot of troubleshooting on the dog's part. The dog has to sometimes get away from the lure, get away from the help, whether it's the lure or the physical assistance, and the dog has to figure out, okay, what do I do here? And obedience can be that much of a mental exercise. It really can be. So if I give the person that maybe doesn't have the experience and all the knowledge and all the savviness to troubleshoot these little things, if I give him one of these dogs are not really invested in the activity to begin with, right? They would rather just be sniffing the ground. And I've worked with dogs like that, and I have dogs like that. They just would rather not be doing those things because they're really not motivated by what you have. Okay? So the investment is not there as much. But if I give that person, right, again, the person has the willingness to get it done, but maybe their skill is not, it's not up there just because maybe they lack some of the experience. But I give them a working dog. And by the way, not every working dog is resilient, okay? Not every working dog is easy to motivate. There are working dogs. This is what temperament and the individual personality of each single individual comes into play. I've seen Malinois that just don't want to do anything, that they're not that resilient, they're not really invested. So that does happen. And I'm making generalizations here. So in general, like if I give that person maybe not a whole lot of experience, not a whole lot of skill, but a lot of willingness to get it done, and I give them a working dog, whether it's a lab, a field lab, or a Malinois, right? If I give them that type of dog, those dogs are typically motivated by what that person has. That person might have food, that person might have a toy, or that person might just go, no, I don't do either of those. I'm very, very traditional, very old school. It's just you're just gonna get it done just because you're gonna get it done, right? Whatever the case might be, these dogs, these working dogs, tend to be more invested in the activity, even if it's in spite of the struggle. They're typically more willing to go through with it. There's more of a satisfaction that they get out of it, which is why they typically do great in sports. Okay, and sports that are very complex and sports that have a lot of physical contact in the sport, right? You work with a Malinois. I mean, you can make 10 mistakes in a row with a good Malinois. You could make 10 mistakes in a row, and the 10th mistake might be a hard mistake where the dog does something they're not supposed to, and they kind of, they brick wall themselves, so they end up sustaining a little bit of an injury. The 11th time, that dog is just as willing to do it as the first time. Okay, I've had this with my personal dog where um, my dog will make a mistake, right? They'll do something. I tell them to, hey, do something else, but they're so driven that they're like, no, I'm committed to this wrong decision. And the wrong decision happens to be maybe they brickwall themselves on a helper that wasn't ready. And so what happens is they freaking fling. That happened to my dog recently. Fling up in the air, spin like 3 times, fall on the ground. Painful. But what did that dog want to do? He wanted to go right back. And I was like, whoa, no, 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 right? And now and then I had to take like several weeks, like a month of just not working at all. And if it was a different type of dog, a less resilient type of dog, if I brought him back to the field, that dog would have been like, I'm not doing this again. That last mistake I made was painful. But not the Malinois I have, and not the case with a lot of other Malinois or working dogs. They go right back into it and they're like, yeah, I want to do it again. So their toughness is mental and physical too. And that is what makes it more appealing for a lot of trainers to own, because you can make a few more mistakes with them, and they love the struggle. They love they're motivated by what you have. They're motivated by the activity, and they just want to keep going at it. They're more invested. So this is why a lot of times you see dog trainers with these working dogs. You see them with either field labs, right? You'll see them with labs. A lot of times you see black labs, which are the more resilient of the labs. Or you'll see them with pointers, or you'll see them a lot of times with Malinois, right? These are working dogs, German Shepherds too. But German Shepherds can be a little bit more sensitive. But not always, by the way. But in certain aspects, German Shepherds can be a little bit more sensitive. So a lot of people, you can make 10 mistakes with a Malinois. The 11th time, that dog is, he's wanting to go again in spite of your 10 mistakes. And the 11th time, that Malinois will forgive you. And then we're like, no, I get it. Let's try to do it again. We'll figure this out. With a German Shepherd, a lot of times, the German Shepherd, you make 5 mistakes in a row, that German Shepherd's going to start questioning your ability. And he's going to be like, do you even know what you're doing? Right, so the German Shepherds are a little bit smarter that way, but they're still great dogs. There's a little bit of that difference where the Malinois is more like, yeah, let's do it again. Boom. No, that's fine. I know you didn't get it right, but let's do it again. Oh, I didn't get it right. Let's do it again. So that it's a great trait that a lot of people are attracted to when it comes to the Malinois. Now let's talk about the other dogs, the bloodhounds, the basset hounds, the mastiffs, the guardians of the flock. These are dogs that were bred. You think about the guardian of the flock, okay? The guardians of the flock, the livestock dogs. They were not bred to work with the human. The guardians of the flock were bred to be away from the human with the flock, right? And be independent, work independently. they don't really need you. They don't really need you. This is why a lot of people that have Great Pyrenees and other types of guardians of the flock, they have a really hard time with obedience because you typically don't have something that they're motivated by. They're not really motivated by your toys. They're not typically motivated by your food. They can be, right? If they're hungry, they'll absolutely work for food. But they're a little bit, they're not as invested in the activity of obedience or doing anything with you, because that's not the genetic trait that they were bred for. Same thing with the scent hounds. If you look at a scent hound, what they were bred for is they were not bred to be with you. They were bred to work kind of away from you. Right? A scent hound can get lost on a trail. And, they're not lost. They just follow the trail far away from you. And that's kind of what they were bred for. They don't really, there isn't really a whole lot that you can have that they can be motivated by, which is why training can be a little bit more challenging. This is where skill as a trainer comes into play, because now you have to arrange, how do I give a dog something that he wants? How do I motivate him with something he wants? And it's not something that I typically have. And yes, the scent hounds and the mastiffs and the guardians of the flock, they will work for food. I know that. But in the bigger scale of obedience training, in the bigger scale of just obedience in general, past the treats, past the pet, they're not a whole lot motivated by what you have. Okay, so this is why there's drastically different pictures when you're doing obedience with a German Shepherd, a Black Lab, or a Lab. Any of the retriever dogs, any herding breed. When you're doing obedience with them, they tend to look a little bit better, a little bit sharper, because you can have something that they want, right? The exchange could be, you do this really nice obedience, you get to bite this dog, you get to chase the ball, right? And even for the treats, they get excited for the treats. So they're more invested. They're working with you, and they want to just kind of be part of it typically. Whereas the scent hounds, the guardians of the flock, the mastiffs, they're not really as invested. So they'll do it, but it's like you kind of have to make them do it a little bit. And so there's that picture. That's the difference between the Malinois and the other breeds. And so what's more impressive? It really depends as well. I'm very impressed by the willingness of the dog to work. That's impressive. That definitely speaks to the dog, to the quality of the dog. You have a good dog. I don't just look at it as, wow, man, that trainer is an amazing trainer. I definitely look at that's a huge factor as well. But I also enjoy the quality of the dog. So when I see a dog that is resilient and is happy and excited, I look at that and I'm like, that's a nice dog, right? And I also look at the skill of the trainer. So definitely you can see that there is a bit of an advantage when it comes to the picture, the overall picture, right? If I have a trainer and I tell them, here, train this Malinois or this this Lab or this Blue Heeler, train them for 5 months. And, by the end of the 5 months, that dog's going to look really nice. If I give the same exact trainer a bloodhound or, a Great Pyrenees, and same thing, give him 5 months, the picture is going to look different. And yes, I have no doubt that this trainer will have the bloodhound, working and even looking nice, but the picture overall will not be the same. Whereas there's more enthusiasm from the herding breeds, from the retrievers, than there tends to be with the other dogs, right? With the pet dogs, with the other groups of dogs. So that's the difference. So what looks more impressive? some people will definitely say, well, I'm not impressed by the Malinois. I've heard people say that. I'm not impressed by the Malinois, by the guy doing obedience with the Malinois. I can see the point there because I have seen some trainers that, again, don't have a whole lot of experience that do manage to make very impressive pictures of obedience when you give them the right dog. So some people will say, I'm not impressed by the Malinois, by you doing obedience with the Lab or the German Shepherd. I'm more impressed by the guy who can make the Basset Hound look really happy. That definitely is a relative concept. I mean, if you can make that Basset Hound look happy, and that Basset Hound is like really into it, I can look at it as that is great skill. I'm also looking at it as that's a great dog too. Because let's remember the statements that I'm making here are very general. I'm not talking about specifics. I told you a moment ago that there are Malinois that are not resilient. There are Malinois that are not invested. There are Malinois that are soft, that will crumble with, if you make one mistake, they crumble. They're like, I'm done. I want to quit. There are Malinois that are like that. So when I was talking about this entire time, I'm making generalizations, but I did mention that there are individuals, there are differences in individual temperament where dogs don't fit that criteria. The same thing happens on the other side, where you can see, and I have seen it too. I have seen bloodhounds that are like really into you, that just really that are happy, that are excited, they're invested. So there are individuals that do exhibit some traits that are a little bit different, right? You could see two bloodhounds. One of them doesn't even want to look at you at all. They just want to keep their nose on the ground. They're either sleeping, eating, or nose on the ground. And that could give you another bloodhound, maybe even in the same litter. Okay, that's how much it can vary. The personality can vary. But if I give you another bloodhound that is not like that, that is more like, hey, I want to be with you, I want to work with you, I'm motivated by what you have. That does happen. So this is why it's a relative concept, right? To me, from a trainer's perspective, because I have worked all these dogs, I have struggled with the guardians of the flock. Okay, I recently had a Malinois that I work with. She was about 8 months. It's about 8 months, and during her stay, she came into heat, so it added even a little bit of a curveball to the training, because when females are in heat, they can be a little bit more sensitive. And this dog in 2 weeks made tremendous progress. In 2 weeks, this dog looked really good. Now, granted, it was only 2 weeks, and it wasn't to obviously to a very high level. We would definitely need more time for that. But in 2 weeks, the progress that this dog made, going from, she was kind of green, she really hadn't done a whole lot, to by the end of the 2 weeks, we were doing off-leash stuff. And it took about 2 weeks, and for one of those weeks, she was in full heat. Right? That's a Malinois that was willing to work. She loved what I had. I did have something that motivated her. And she wanted it. She wanted to work. She was resilient. So in 2 weeks, I was able to make great progress, because she always was motivated by what I had. And not too long before that, I had a Great Pyrenees. I had a Great Pyrenees for maybe a little bit over 3 weeks, but roughly about 3 weeks. And the progress. Okay, I'm the same trainer. Okay, I am the same person, and the progress was definitely not where I would have wanted it to be. Okay, we made progress, but it's certainly not to the level that I would have been like, this dog is, she's doing amazing. We made progress, but in contrast to the progress I made with that Malinois in 2 weeks, it was a big difference. The difference, obviously, in variables was, one was a Malinois that was very motivated by what I had, very resilient. The other was a Great Pyrenees, and they're both about the same age. The Great Pyrenees was a little bit older. The Great Pyrenees, right, more independent. At first, she didn't even want to work for food. So not a whole lot motivated by what I had. So I had to be a little bit more creative with how I motivated her. And I had to use, different techniques that I would have used with the Malinois. So that's how much of a contrast it is. And that's why some people are not impressed by the guy doing obedience with the Malinois and are more impressed by the guy or the girl doing obedience with like the Great Pyrenees or the Mastiff. And even within Mastiffs, is a big change as well. You can have Mastiffs that really don't want to work with you. They're very happy, very content being themselves, being by themselves. And there are some Mastiffs that want to be all over you, that are more willing to work with you, more invested in working with you. So in general, those are the differences, right? And I did mention earlier pet dogs. What category are the pet dogs? The pet dogs could be really anything. It could be a mix of breeds. It could be a certain category. I did mention something very specific by saying the doodle, right? So the doodle is typically we associate that with the pet dog. We don't really see a whole lot of doodles doing sports. There are some here and there, and we attribute that to the temperament of the dog. A lot of it is the dog. So you don't see a whole lot of doodles doing sports. Some do for sure. But that's kind of, when I think of the doodle, I think of the pet dog. And the pet dog could be, again, it could be anything. It could be a mutt. Or it could be a working dog that just doesn't want to be working. They just want to be content being in the house, and there's not a whole lot of resilience, and really not a lot of investment into the obedience activity. So these dogs in general are, they're not difficult necessarily to train, but sometimes, depending on the dog, it can be a little bit difficult to motivate them. Again, depending on the dog, and some can be very easy to motivate. So that's the different categories that we have. We have the working dogs that really want to work with you. We have the working dogs that were bred to work away from you. So they're not really motivated by being with you. And then you have sort of the companion dogs, where they really don't want to work, or they'll work if the opportunity arises, but it's not really what their desire is, whether that's a genetic trait as a result of breeding, or whether that's a temperament trait as a result of the individual personality of that animal. So that's pretty much it. It was a good question. I hope that answered your question. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.